I'm just so grateful that you put pieces in the book. So it,
Oh, it's beautiful.
yeah, it really looks good. So,
Wow, thank you.
the reason I feel like you're a really important part of the book from my end was that, you have such a beautiful sense of who you are and what your work is about. And I love your powerful statement. So I really want to interview you just to, I'm going to be asking you some questions, and I'm just excited to hear about your background and where you are, because there's a lot of people who are in, intentional metalsmithing is a lot about just people finding their way, and how do they find their own voice, and how do they get inside themselves, and where do they get inspired from. So it's a lot of that. And Christine and I chose you as an artist because you have a strong vision, and a beautiful one.
I'm glad it translates that way, because it's not been an easy thing to come to, and I feel like it's always changing. But that's part of that vision. It's the fluidity, with which I can approach it. I feel like we're different from day to day. And for a long time, I struggled against that in my creations, but it makes sense, doesn't it? That even if our essence is the same from day to day, there are elements of us that are different. And so I think it's authentic that's reflected in the things I make. And I feel like I'm at the place where there's a cohesion now, but it's never the same.
Because I love that you said at the beginning that it was hard. It's a hard process, but it's a worthy one, right? And it's changing and fluid. So I like that. So how did you get started? How did you get started back in time?
Well, I guess I just came to it very organically. Um, I didn't have any formal training, but I've always been kind of a creator, and loved the independence of doing things for myself and figuring out how to make things for myself. Whether we built our own house, we grow our own food, I make my own soap. I like to be kind of self-sustainable. And and so when my husband and I got together, I'd already been dabbling in, making fun jewelry, things like that. But he came to me with some silversmithing background. He's older than I am, and back in the 70s, he grew up in Arizona and had on the Navajo reservation, and had friends who were Navajo, and so he had taken silversmithing classes and was working with some of his friends in producing jewelry that went over to Europe. But he had all the tools, and they were old. A lot of them hadn't been used for decades, but they were beautiful and wonderful. And so right away, I was like, teach me how to use those tools. So he taught me the basic soldering, and then I just started to play. And I was teaching at the time, and about 10 years ago, I resigned from that. We did a little travel, and I was able to invest myself full time. But it's been really a journey of trial and error, and acquisition of skills through need and curiosity and exploration.
Oh my God, that's so interesting. Then you know what I find? There's almost everyone in this book is not traditionally trained, because it really, you can see your art form, you can see you're doing things different. It looks like, you're not afraid. It looks like your work, one of the descriptions I could say is fearless,
Oh, thank you.
it sounds like you're really willing to try. So what are you inspired by in your work? Where do you get your ideas from? Are you off on a farm, did you say?
Well, it's not a farm, but I am surrounded by nearly 360 views. I'm in Southwest Colorado in the high desert where the canyons meet the mountains. And I grew up in Western Oregon, which is a very different but beautiful landscape as well. And so I think that it's my relationship with the natural world, and it's what I see when I look out my window. I have mountains on two sides of me and mesas on the other, and I spend as much time out in them as I can, and that's where I feel most myself and most at home. and we built our home so that we feel like we're outside when we're inside.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
Great.
so I think that's probably where most of it comes from. And then also trying to find a voice to communicate that, because, I'm picky about who I go out into the wilderness with, but I also want to share it with everybody. So,
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
yes.
okay.
So it's,
So
it's
yeah, that is
finding voice.
actually that is one of the things that I can see that I actually have on my questions for you specifically, because I know you're talking about nature, and I can see your pieces look like they're sand and dirt and blown and and put together. And so I mean, I can see so much in nature here. Now, it's one of the things that I talk about, like, how do you soak this in and transcribe it in your work? Like, it's a process, and sometimes it's hard, right? What would you
Oh,
say?
it's always hard.
Yeah, you're tricky. Like, you're taking something physical and you're bringing it into the etheric world, and then you're
Yeah.
reinterpreting it, right?
Right. Yeah. So a lot of it gets translated in the form of patterns that I see over and over in different iterations in the natural world. And, it could, I like right now, I love the pattern of cell structure, and I see it in the way that mud cracks. I see it in my skin.
Oh, yeah. Oh my
As I
God.
age.
Oh, I
It's,
love that. Okay,
and
I'm
so
looking.
it's trying to shed new light on things that I love symmetry for the reasons that it also encourages people to linger. It invites contemplation. It's hard to dismiss. And I think that when you can shed a new light on things that we see all the time, whether it's a shape of a leaf or the shape of an almond that translates to the shape of an eye, it's trying to give a new lens to things that we see all the time, so that it might encourage a new way of seeing, maybe a form of reverence, a new, it invites a new relationship. And I hope that's what it does. I want to make things that that are worthy of consideration, that are more than or baubles, that take a step beyond ornamentation, although I see great value in that as well.
We got to see, Christina brought you one of your pieces that she bought down to Mexico, so where I was teaching a workshop, and we all got to really love it and enjoy your work in person. And I do want to say that I feel like you're right on, because when you look at your work, you're keeping your viewer inside and the attention by all of your little details. So, I feel like you put a lot of little tiny details. Is there nothing too small for you to consider in your work on a big piece,
Yeah, no, but that's part of the challenge too, is to sometimes the ideas are so big that a piece starts to encompass them. And I find I have to pare away at it a little bit. Otherwise, maybe the gist is easy to overlook if the details are too overwhelming. And sometimes the gist is about the details, but sometimes there's a simpler message that can get lost, so it's always a balancing act, and it's different with every piece. And well, with your work, you must go through that too. Your pieces are very complicated, and layered, and have more than one voice. It's like a chorus.
Yes, except we're talking about your work.
Yeah, but part of it's hard for me to articulate about my work, so it helps me to look at another person's work.
I think that's why I can see it in your work, because I agree. It's like, that's what I love, and that's what I attempt to do too. So I know, and it's like, I love that people get to hear this from you. It's like, sometimes people think work like this is just like, I'm throwing everything together, and stomping on it, and like jumping and you know what I mean? But it's like exactly what you're saying. It's like, to get to things not, well, in fact, when I first started teaching my talisman classes, you know, where I had multiples of all these things, you have to do such a fine balance. I had to do such a fine balancing act. And an
Yes.
artist could see it, but not a regular person. But that's the pieces that are recognized to go in museums, because, you know, to be worthy of in a collection, and you can ask more money because you've got so much meticulous work behind all your layers.
Yeah, and a lot of thought, and you know, and you kind of broach that subject of you know, like, what is the worth? What is the worth to me? What is the worth to somebody else? And you know, and there's, to do what I love to do, there has to be a monetary, you know, consideration as well. And oh, isn't that the hardest part? Because it is. I don't use like really high-end stones for most pieces, and you know, and so really what you get is a piece of me, you know.
Yes, and a piece of art. Yes, and a piece of
Yes.
the earth, and
Yes.
like a talisman, a memory. Like if somebody came and visited you out in Colorado and they spent time hiking, they, you know, if they saw a piece of, and they loved it, those are the people that would want that. Even if they didn't know why they
Yeah.
wanted it, they would want it because it reminds them of their you and their whole experience. And yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's always my hope, is that it can help to inspire a connection with something, whether it's a memory of hiking as a child for somebody, or a trip to the ocean, or a favorite tree, or whatever it is. You know, I
So
hope that
how
it
do you price your
inspires that.
work? People are going to want to know, how do you decide on pricing?
Oh, well, you know, there's that formula. I try to
Okay.
stick to the formula of
Oh,
material sometimes, you know, but it's difficult. It's hard to take out how much emotion, you know, like factoring in how much kind of an emotional and the mental aspect, the designing aspect. Um, but you know, so I stick with a formula, and then I and then I tweak it a little. And oftentimes when I do the formula, I look at a piece and I go, oh my gosh, can I really, you know, ask that? Because I end up not paying myself probably as much as I think I should.
your pieces are
But
low. Yeah, but you're
yeah,
happy. You feel good about it.
I am. And usually it's enough, but over time, you know, I've learned to value my work differently, because I want to keep doing this.
Yes. Yeah. And you know what it's
Yeah.
like? I always notice when you're, tell me if this is similar for you. It's like when I'm doing my own work, it looks so much like me, then I'm like, whatever. But look at this person's work, you know?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So
It's
it's
hard not to
like that's,
compare.
it's like you have to kind of know how valuable you are and
Yeah.
remove yourself from that, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. And that's, you know, and there's always that vulnerability of putting your work out there too. We do art shows. My husband helps me, and we'll do some shows in the summer. And, you know, I was so intrepid at first, because you're seeing people's responses on their faces and the way they interact with pieces. And, you know, it takes a little, it takes, I have to gird my loins, you know, before an art show, because
Yes. Okay.
yeah, and
So
it's
what
true
do you
whenever you
think?
put,
Don't
oh,
finish.
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. No,
Oh,
I'm
it's
sorry.
true
Finish.
whenever you put your work out there, whether you see firsthand people's responses, or you know, or you just can imagine them. And I think, and that's worthy work too. For me, that's big work. That's a good personal work. It's practice at being fearless. So I'm glad it's coming across in what you're seeing, because it doesn't come easily.
So, oh my gosh, it's like, I'm really, thank you for talking a lot about this subject, because this is a big one. You know, it's like um, everyone's had their different voice in the book. And I love this because here's the thing is that you are choosing, I can see talking to you, you're choosing to stay open and sensitive so you can get in there and build your pieces, because that's what you need. But then where your stumbling block would be is to stand in front of your work exposing all of you in front of all these people walking past.
Yes,
So
yeah,
it's like, that's always the balance, right?
yeah.
Some people decide to shut down, in workshops, I would have a lot of people that just shut down because they want to be on the selling end of things, but then they
Uh-huh.
couldn't find out how to get in there and get the ideas. You know what I mean? So
Right,
it's like
right.
so you have this other side of it. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I'll never be a good production person. Um, that's that's for sure. But and I think marketing is always going to be difficult because it means I feel like I'm promoting me, but my work is so much part of me that that I it's just I have to continue to practice learning to do that in a way that feels authentic, but can also reach a wide audience. And so I've kind of just let that grow on its own over time without um I invest intention in it, but I don't invest a lot in mastering the tools that would make me most effective, like the media tools and things like that I
Oh,
would.
yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
it's like some people, your work just has to speak for you more so. And you probably, so if people, I have a couple more questions, but I might as well ask this one now. If people wanted to find your work, how can
Mhm.
they buy your work? Do you sell off of Instagram or do you have a shop?
Well, I just have an Etsy shop and
Okay.
I do sell off of Instagram,
Okay.
and then I've made some great connections through shows. So, but most of the sales are online these days. Especially the post COVID, I haven't gotten, I'm just doing very limited shows, haven't gotten back into the full swing after a couple of years
Okay.
off,
Well, that's good for people online then to know that they would have a chance to buy one of your pieces.
Yes, and then there are a couple of brick and mortars that carry my work, and 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 they're available in just limited places. So and I can share that,
Well, in the
with
links,
the.
put those in the
Yeah,
links and get this print.
yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, that's good. Well, hey, so what does your day look like? How does your week look like? How do you structure your life do you take walks 3 times a week, or do you get in your studio 5 times a week, or once, or like, what is your typical, if you put it into a,
Well, it's kind of open. I mean, I have a way I prefer to work, but I also have to leave room for life to happen.
okay.
So what I like to do is to get up very early before the sun comes up when it's very quiet still, and take time to work on uh, exercise for my body, and then quiet time to set my peace of mind, and then read for a little while and get out into the garden or take a walk outside. And then I like to go to the bench mid-morning, so I don't get started at the bench very early, but then I can work all the way into late evening too.
Oh,
It depends, there are times when things come up, and I'm so grateful to have the flexibility to take time to go visit family, or to be available for a family member locally if the need arises, and the mountains call.
yes.
That has to, I make room for that. But on working days, which are most days, I don't like to be away from the bench for too long. There's just this need that pulls
So
me back.
daily.
Almost daily. Yeah. Yeah, almost
Wow,
daily.
that's
And it's a
amazing.
loose structure. I change it up. Sometimes I only have a couple hours, and that's fine, and inspiration doesn't always come at the bench. Most of the time it comes away from the bench, and so I have to build in that time too, or at least allow space for it. And I taught for a long time, and I didn't have the opportunities to have that openness. Everything was very structured and scheduled, and so I'm just incredibly grateful for that gift of being able to structure my day as it unfolds, like not having to plan days and days ahead of time, you know, what it's
Yeah.
going to look like.
Did you teach silversmithing?
No, I taught 6 to 9 year olds in a Montessori environment in public school.
Oh, I love
Yeah. So,
that. I taught
yeah.
Montessori too, but I did the whole art
Yeah.
program
Oh,
from
you did.
school to sixth grade. I did the whole art program. Yeah.
Oh, some of my favorite artists were Montessorians.
Oh my gosh, I studied Waldorf, loved
Mm,
Waldorf, but I was in Chicago and there wasn't like a big community for
right.
Waldorf. But I love Montessori. So that's, yeah, it really is, gets you thinking and it's your creative process. It was fun because I could just spread out on a concept, and then teach it on different
Yes.
levels through the grades. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's, I think I felt very at home there because I was able to dive into and really share my love of the natural world. And that's the crux of the curriculum for the age I was teaching. So it really fed that, for me for those years that I taught. And then when I felt like I wasn't able to, I didn't have the energy to meet my own standard. And I did want to explore living, immersing myself in the life of a creative. It was really a natural transition. And I'm grateful that I was able to do that. It took a little courage to take the jump, but it was
Oh,
the
yeah.
right thing for me. Yeah, and the timing
Okay.
was good.
So like do you guys live off the grid? You don't live off the grid.
Yes,
You
we
live
live
off
off
the
the grid.
grid.
We
Oh my
do.
gosh, that
Yeah.
is a big jump going from working to the artist and off the grid. That's amazing.
Well, I did live off the grid when I taught too. I just
Okay.
would drive, it's like a 25-minute drive into work, but I love that transition time to get
Okay.
the
Oh my gosh.
headset in the right place for
Yeah.
teaching. And then, yeah. So it was, yeah, it's lovely. We have 5 acres, not a real big lot. And we're not remote, but my nearest town is a town of about 1,000, and we're about 6 miles out from that. And so it's rural and access to the national forest, and I can
Well,
be
how
out
long
in the
have you
woods
been working
in
full
just a
time
few
then?
minutes.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So, how long have you been full time then? You know, outside of
Oh,
school?
about 10 years.
Oh,
Yeah.
wonderful. Okay, I thought I had read. Yeah. Okay, so that's so interesting. So I love how you got started. I love that you got started like with, Native American Indian. It's such a well-kept secret too. So that's amazing that you had access to tools and even learning from, some of the people. Some of my first books were written by Native American, where they were literally using pumps. I've been to different countries
Wow.
where people use bellows to
Uh-huh.
heat a fire to solder your pieces, which is fascinating to me.
Wow.
It's always the rustic tools that I love. And
Right.
being
And
able,
what people can do with them.
yes, oh my gosh, what people can do with them is so interesting. So how does hollow forms, I see so many beautiful hollow forms in your work, and that's the chapter you're in my book, in Intentional Metalsmithing. So tell me a little bit about hollow forms and
Well,
why you love them.
I think it kind of started for me in the need. I mean, what I love about jewelry is the sculptural capabilities and possibilities with creating with metal and stone. And I love the hollow forms because it adds volume without a lot of weight. So that's like the practical aspect of it. I wanted pieces that were more volumetric and more sculptural, and hollow forms were kind of a natural step into that. I'm always looking for ways to make something that's solid look less solid. And so I'm playing with hollow forms. I mean, do they have to have solid sides? Do they
Yeah,
have to,
yeah.
always looking at different iterations for that. But I also love the idea of them being vessels and containers. Even if there's no way to open it, I feel like we can still, it's a way to carry an intention with us as we go. And of course I put my own in when I make pieces, but there's room in there for whomever the piece eventually ends up with to imbue it with their own intention. And I think it becomes, well, talismanic. And I know that that's something that you're very well versed in. And I think that the hollow forms are like that. If it's, whether it's a prayer or just a thought you want to hold on to, there's room in a little vessel around your wrist, around your neck to carry it.
Yeah, good. You know, I haven't actually heard of very many other people who talk about it in this way. So where I'm really glad to hear the way you think about hollow forms. So it's nice. It's really magical. So very nice.
Yeah, it feels like it to me too. And it makes it more interesting for me as a creator. I mean, we don't see the world in 2 dimensions. And so
Right.
it needs to be more of an expression of what I experience.
Good. Oh my gosh. Well, listen, I want to ask you one last question, and it's kind of about like, what could you say, what type of a tip, and maybe it would be like multiple questions in here for designers, for people who are aspiring designers, like what type of a tip could you give them, whether it's, you know, how to be inspired, you know, and maybe a secondary one would be how to find their own voice, that type of a thing.
Well, when I was first starting, my work looked very different. It was more of a literal interpretation of nature, maybe like overlays with birds and leaves and flowers cut out. Um, and and that was fine, and it was good experience in getting skills. And I think that wherever you are in this process, to honor that and inhabit that place fully, but at the same time be willing to take risks. And I think silver is a very forgiving thing, because you can always melt it down and roll it out again and use it. So don't be afraid to jump in and try something different, whether it's just adding a bit of texture or an element, or trying, a whole new design. And really, my inspiration and the forms I use come a lot from what I see in nature, but I also practiced with my own interpretations of the work of people I admired, work that appealed to me. And I would translate it through my lens and, see if I could, maybe it was just one element, like a texture, like reticulation. That wasn't my idea. I used
Okay.
reticulation, but I didn't invent it, so it's really asking yourself what appeals to you and what moves you and what jazzes you about what you're seeing, whether it's in someone else's work or in a piece of architecture or in a tree branch, and then finding how to bring it in and not being afraid to um, try a new technique, even if haven't had experience with it. Mastery comes from experience. Because I haven't had formal training, my skill set is not broad, but it's deep in the areas that that I have explored, because I think you gain a depth of learning from experimentation, and trial and error. And so I think that know what you like, and then try it. Don't be afraid, and reach out for help when you need it. When I've gotten stuck and haven't been able to figure out how to do something I wanted to do, I contact people who I think do it well, or I attend a workshop, or I ask,
Oh,
because
good. That's good
yeah,
advice.
most people are really willing and open to sharing. I mean, that's kind of why I think a lot of us do what we do. We're not proprietary. We want, we want other people to be able to have access to the same forms of expression.
Yes, because we know that eventually, and it sounds like you're saying eventually in the end, you can't help but to do your own work. Yes,
That's
you
true.
can find out reticulation, you can research all of this, but in the end, when you're in your studio, you're going to find your own work. And I've seen, you know, I had that intentional metalsmithing course, and I've seen people go all the way through it, and their work looks like mine, looks like mine, looks like mine, looks like mine. Boom, it looks like theirs.
Exactly. But they need some place to start to acquire the skills. Yeah. And I think that helps. I admire, I admire the teachers, because you're saying, here's what I do. Yes, you go and do, here's how I do it. So go and do it. And it's okay if it looks like what I'm doing, because eventually it won't, because you
Right.
can't help to filter it through your own lens.
Yes, and then you all, and also it's like even the teachers always keep changing. Your work is always evolving. So you're leaving things behind, and that might be a morsel to me, somebody else leaving something behind, or someone might get a morsel from me, or so it's like all down the line, and one big
Yes.
circle. And it's like, I'm always really teaching, not being threatened by one another.
Yeah, because we don't evolve in isolation. Not very well anyway.
Yeah, because even if you're off on your own, you go out and you find things. So that's great.
Yeah.
I love everything of what you're saying, but I also love it in context to this whole book, because as I'm speaking to all the contributing artists, everyone has a different voice. So it's so interesting to me to see.
Yeah.
So yours is so different. I love that you're off the grid. I love that you're spending a lot of time. You're looking at things, but you're not spending, there's some of the students that spend a lot of time on Pinterest, like, oh, that and this and that, this and this, but you're really spending a lot of time inwardly building. So I love that.
Yeah, and it's always changing. So, and hopefully that will be true for the duration,
Good. Yeah. All right,
Yeah.
Julianne. Well, oh my gosh, it was so nice talking to you. Thank you so much.
And you as well. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.